Hello and welcome to my channel. Welcome to my home. I hope you enjoy the content that I will be producing in the near future for this channel. Most of it will be around the quite specific subjects, I suppose. Those subjects being family history and genealogy, probably specific to two main areas based on my own biases, and those areas are Glasgow specifically, Glasgow and its social history, and the history of the Western Highlands of Scotland, and again specifically the Isle of Tiree, which is where my ancestors come from. And there's a whole breadth, a whole myriad of directions we can go off on those subjects specifically, but of course those places are part of a wider country, the country of Scotland, and of course I'm extremely interested in the history of Scotland as well. And yeah, I'm sure there'll be opportunity for me to spin off and to consider other aspects of Scottish history, which I will explore and muse on. And yeah, if that sort of thing sounds like if those subjects, those places sound like the type of thing that you're interested in, then this might be a channel that you would be interested in having a look at every now and again. So I guess you'd be interested to know why I've started this channel. So I'll give a bit of background. So my name is Archie Henderson. I live in Glasgow, and I've been working in the heritage sector for pretty much my whole working life, my whole working career, from the age of 16 to now, the ripe old age of 41, soon to be 42. And for the majority of that time, I've been working in museums around Scotland, which has been a passion of mine, interpreting history through objects and through stories is the main thing that I really enjoy doing. And I've worked throughout my career to get into positions where I've been able to do that. Most recently on a major capital project that I was involved in, or have been involved in, for the past 10 years, so a huge chunk of my life, my working life anyway, has been dedicated over the past decade to a project in Paisley called the Paisley Museum Reimagined project, which is certainly for my part, my involvement has now come to an end. So I guess I've been at a bit of a crossroads in recent months since since my time at Paisley ended. And I hasten to add, actually, before I started at Paisley, and in between museum jobs, my interests in history have always been developing, morphing in different ways. And from initially being very interested in ancient civilizations and ancient history and antiquity when I was a young undergrad and studying those subjects, classical civilization, Celtic civilization. As I've gotten older, my historical interests have become a lot more recent as well. I've become a lot more interested in people and people's motivations and the everyday human experience and why people do certain things, why people make the choices that they made in history and what we can learn from that. Essentially social history. So, and I was very lucky within my most recent role to work specifically within a social history context. At Paisley Museum, I was a researcher initially, and latterly the social history curator at Paisley Museum, developing what we call story displays. I was the author and curator who was developing the new displays for the new Paisley Museum based around social history. So understanding history through stories has always been a key part of my practice. But before I was working at Paisley Museum, I was actually working as a professional genealogist, because my real passion and my real skill set, which I was able to implement in my work as a curator at Paisley Museum, comes from genealogy and family history. That really started off as I suppose it started off as a hobby for me many, many years ago, and developed into a passion, something that I took upon and did myself, in terms of learning about myself and my own family. But in the study of genealogy, I found that it was a real game changer. It was almost, I wouldn't say life-changing in many ways, or life-affirming, perhaps, maybe that'd be a better word, or I'm not sure what the best phrase would be, but it certainly gave me an amazing sense of perspective, which I felt was like a gift. In fact, I'm just remembering that whilst I was working as a genealogist, I was accredited through the only accrediting body for genealogists and researchers in Scotland. It's an organisation called ASGRA, the Association of Scottish Genealogists and Researchers in Archives, and their motto is Historia Magistri Est, I believe. I may have gotten that wrong, I hope not, but Historia Magistri Est, I think, which I know I may have gotten that Latin incorrect, hopefully not, but certainly it should translate in English to history is life's teacher, which is a kind of mantra really that I was operating under even before I knew that motto. But now that once I became aware of it, when I was a probationary member of ASGRA, it's really stuck with me, because I feel like it's a phrase that really matches up with how I view the world and how I use history. And yeah, so I went to university, I should say, back to do a postgrad to study genealogy. Again, a long time ago, that would have been 2012, I think, around that time, when I went to study genealogy, because from being just interested in it on a personal level and valuing what it had done for me personally, I realised that I really enjoyed the process of doing genealogical work, and I find the value that I find in family history research is like a gift. I find it's like a gift out there that's available to everyone, and it's one that I enjoy sharing. I get a real kind of personal buzz of helping people achieve the gift of family history and genealogy that I have been lucky enough to experience myself. So yeah, I realised that I enjoyed doing it for other people as well, and therefore that probably I should look at doing this professionally, and so went back to uni to study it properly at Strathclyde, and then have operated my own research service for a couple of years before I got the gig working at Paisley Museum on the Paisley Museum project, where I still was able to use a lot of the research skills and practice that had been useful to me as a genealogist. So genealogy has always been a big part of my life back then, and again I think it still is, and probably a bit of a crossroads in my life at the moment, where I've been considering my next move in recent months since I've finished up at Paisley, And I've been thinking about various things, but the main thing I've been thinking about is trying to assess what it is that inspires me still and what I'm passionate about. And it still is the same subject, really. And there's a good chance that I'm coming around to the idea, at least, of becoming a professional genealogist again. Perhaps you can let me know if you think that's a good idea or not. I'm hoping there'll be good positivity, good encouragement out there. So, yeah. So I'm hoping that we can share a bit of a journey together, and a bit of a historical journey together, and hopefully this will be helpful to me, but hopefully it'll be helpful to people out there as well. And if it's not helpful, at the very least interesting, if we get to engage with subjects that are interesting to you and to me. So, to be more specific about my own background and where my interest in family history and genealogy started, it starts with me, I suppose, and that's as everybody's journey does when it comes to genealogy and family history. I guess it starts with the individual. And I do sometimes think about when did that happen? Like, as a society, when did people start to look inward and think about themselves and have the desire for this understanding of self and of place and of where they come from? Because I would surmise that it's, in my understanding of history, that it's not always been there, and I would guess, you can tell me if you think I'm right or not, that this kind of emerged in Western society probably from the 1960s onwards, roughly that kind of time, when people started to look at themselves a lot more navel gazing, and there are probably since it's there's a kind of toxic element to that, for want of a better term, where I think that desire to celebrate the self has good aspects to it. It has negative aspects to it as well, to the point where we get to our young generations now, where people are completely obsessed with the idea of fame, of being somebody, of fame being where value should be placed. I would argue, or what I hope to achieve through the work that I do, is to show people that the individuals are extraordinary as you are, that fame is not the answer to being a somebody, certainly when it comes to things like genealogy and family history. I've had conversations with people in the past about the subject, and perhaps it's because you get programmes like Who Do You Think You Are, which are great programmes to spread the gospel of family history, genealogical research, but there is that element to them as well, that they're often focused on celebrities, and celebrities looking for celebrity ancestors in the past, which is not what inspires me when it comes to genealogy, and I think kind of sends not the greatest message about the value of the practice, if you like. For me, doing genealogy is about finding extraordinary in the ordinary. What I mean by that is that, and I've mentioned this before, you'll probably hear me mention it again. I'll probably say, you'll see different videos of me saying similar things, but the fact that you are here now watching this video is extraordinary. And what do I mean by that? It means that you are part of an unbroken line of pedigree that stretches back some 250,000 to 300,000 years of modern humans. An unbroken line of pedigree that ends with you now. Okay, so that's almost too difficult for anyone to take in. Well, it is too difficult for anyone to take in. That span, that number of people and what that all means. But even at a very basic level, you have to understand that must mean that you are a product of survival. All of us here, me speaking to you into the ether just now, and you watching, if you are still engaged, if you've not switched off, we are the descendants of survivors. Survivors of what? Well, the human experience and all its glory and all its awfulness, it's and that is something. Again, it doesn't take a historian to be aware of the fact that there's been wars in the past, there's been famines, there's been so much that can happen at any given time to any given individual that it really is a miracle. The survival of us, when we think of all those who haven't survived to get to the stage that we've got, it may just be luck, but in many respects it may just be luck. But no matter, your predecessors struggled long enough to survive just to pass on to the next generation. In some instances that might not mean lots of siblings. In some instances that's just one individual who survived, or maybe one child who was born, or one sibling who survived amongst a whole host of brothers and sisters. But it's when I sit and think about the survival, about how unlikely it is that's what makes you important. And how can that not inspire you, I think, and once you realise that, once you have that perspective, to know that you're part, whether you like it or not, you're part of something that's much bigger than yourself. You always will be. Whether you go on to have children or not, it doesn't matter. You're the end product. You're the last. At the present moment, you're the last chapter in a book that you get to write the ending in yourself. And it's it's an amazing thing to realise, and I think that's, for me, what gives every individual value. It's like, as I said, I've spoken to people in the past and they might say, based off the fact that they watch these programmes like Who Do You Think You Are? And so on, other ancestral DNA programmes that are like it, they'll say, oh well, there's no point in me doing my family history. I'm not going to be related to anybody significant or anybody famous or anybody important. And that's what I'm always trying to stress to people. It's not about finding celebrity ancestors. Although by odds, you probably are at some point related to somebody. Everyone will be a Robert the Bruce or somebody important. You get the idea. It's just actually making those connections for ordinary people can be difficult. But I would argue not to look for those celebrity ancestors. What you have to understand is that if you come from if you're descended from a family of agricultural labourers, do you have any idea how hard they struggled every day, how hard they toiled what their experience of the Highland potato famine was, or the First World War, or the Second World War, and how unlikely their survival often at times was. And again, these are things that I will explore in my own story, but I hope that when I talk about my own story that other people can resonate and see likeness in their own stories. Again, I mentioned big historical themes there. The potato famine, First and Second World Wars, they're the examples that spring to mind that I can tie my own family to. And the chances of survival in these instances, I mean, when it comes to war, I remember talking to my grandfather when he was still alive, who ran the Normandy shuttle service, if you can believe that, which essentially meant the landing craft. He was in the Royal Navy, and he was responsible for driving the landing craft onto the beaches at Normandy. I discovered this through military research and getting his records from the MOD. And I was able to clarify it through those records, but yeah, I was able to listen to some of his stories when I was a boy, and also he was obviously told these same stories to my father and my uncle, that, you know, there was bullets flying, as you know. Anyone who's seen the movie Saving Private Ryan, give you a bit of an idea as to what that might have been like. That he wasn't just going to those beaches once. He was going delivering soldiers and then going back to bigger boats to pick up more, to take it back to the beach. He said that at one point he was so racked with the enormity of the chaos that was surrounding him that his tongue stuck to the roof of his mouth as he could literally hear bullets whizzing by his head as he was driving these boats. I'm his grandson. If any one of those bullets had been an inch or two either side, wouldn't be here now. And that's just one example. Obviously, it's an obvious example. They're similar for me. I could talk about my great-grandfather, who was in the First World War in the Royal Artillery on the Western Front, equally horrendous. Or, as I've said, could talk about my great-grandfather, who was born in 1854 on the Isle of Tiree, who lived through the Highland potato famine, whose father had died of unknown causes because there wasn't a doctor on the island at the time. And that's maybe something we can talk about at another time. And when we do our Tiree talks about what life in Tiree was like in the mid-19th century and even earlier. But he died and left his widow, my great-great-granny, with 2 sons to look after. Now, how the hell she managed to survive is, well, again, perhaps a topic for another conversation another time. I can assume she would have relied heavily on kin and her neighbours and other family on the island. But it would have been extremely difficult. People were starving. But she survived. My great-great-grandfather survived into adulthood. So yeah, these are things like this. When you explore history and you see, you might hear, these are big themes. There are big themes, grand narratives in history, like wars and famines. But when you can sometimes they're too big, sometimes they're too complex. Again, thinking about things going back even further into history, things like Jacobitism are they can be extremely difficult concepts to understand. People can understand them at a very basic or romanticised level, but once you get into the nuts and bolts of them, they can be a lot more complex. And so sometimes the best way to understand difficult histories is through the eyes of a single person, through a story arc, if you like. And when that single person is someone that you're directly related to, then it's also your story as well. And for me, the best story you'll ever read in that sense is your own. And yeah, history is life's teacher, as the saying goes. And there's a lot of power in history, a lot of power. Power for good, I think. And the other thing I'll say as well, just before I go and wrap up for this first instalment of my ramblings and musings, is that there are lots of people who maybe don't want to look back, who don't want to think about their parents, who might not, and I've met, again, examples close to me, people who I won't mention, but people who have been close to me in my life, who knew me, who know about my passion for history, for looking backwards, about thinking about dead people who are no longer here, who, when it came to their own lives, the limits of what they knew about their past may not have been good in terms of thinking about their parents or their grandparents, and for that reason didn't want to look back and say, well, I don't want to, why would I want to think about those bad memories or things that make me feel sad. And my response to that would be not to be unempathetic or unsympathetic, but what I endeavour to show people is that, as I've mentioned before, you're part of something much bigger than yourselves, as well are they, and that your connection to your family tree, to your past, is so much bigger than a couple or a few individuals in that family tree who may have done bad things, or might be people who you might not want to remember fondly, or who you don't remember fondly. But there's so much more. There were so many more people in your direct tree than those people. And without question, there have been bad people in everybody's family tree, let's be honest. Sure, people can put on the rose-tinted glasses when they think about history, and it's certainly one of the objects for me is to get people to learn about their past, about the past through individuals and their own history, and those rose-tinted spectacles soon come off once people learn the truth. And for me, the truth is the most important thing. But yeah, for those people who find it difficult to see further back than a couple of generations, if there's been individuals in their family that have given them bad memories or hurtful memories, then, as I say, I believe that the genealogy offers not a cure, but again, perspective. Everybody in everybody's line at some point has had baddies, I'm sure, but you shouldn't let that change your value of your entire line or your entire pedigree, or it'd be a shame, at least, if it tarnishes your willingness or desire to find anything positive in the past, because there's more. There's so much more than you can ever hope to discover. So that's been a bit of a wild ramble for a first video. I'm not sure if I'll have to chop this up and clip it up. Probably. But yeah, I'll move on to other subjects more specifically in due course. So say cheerio for now.